hi everyone and welcome to UI5ers Live. Yeah, unfortunately our summer break was longer than we actually planned for. Once again, sorry for that one. But well, now we are back, and as usual with me are Stefan Beck.
Hi.
Peter Muessig.
Hi.
And Andreas Kunz.
Hello.
Yeah, and then when we are looking into our round, we can spot a new face, and this is Jorge Martins.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, really nice to meet you. Yeah, Jorge was until recently a user experience and UI5 development consultant, but now moved to the SAP BTP observability team. Really a hard word for me. Yeah, I hope this does not mean that we are losing you on our UI5 front.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully, yes, exactly. Yeah, you did some rework on the transpiling tooling extension of the UI5 ecosystem showcase, and these improvements you will demonstrate to us today, right?
Yeah, exactly. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to that. And then I believe we have some additional topics that will take, that will be quite briefly or not so briefly. Let's see. Not sure about that one. And yeah, let's see. One topic I wanted to mention before we start is the SAP Devtoberfest that took place last month. Who joined this event or participate even longer? I did. Yeah, Peter, you do too, I know. Yeah, I think there were quite some cool sessions on UI5, and this is why I wanted to mention this. There was, for example, this one session from Jorge Martins, all of you might know, about testing with VDI5. I can really recommend. Then there was a session with the authors of the book Clean SAP UI5. Really cool book in general. So if you did not hear of this book, that's quite a cool thing, where they teach how you write readable and more testable code. And this session is quite a cool instruction to this book. So also quite recommend that one. And then there was a session with Peter, about performance. And as performance is always an important topic.
Yeah, we showed a little bit here when you get started with we had a bookshop application here, which was started a while back from Nico Schönteich, so one of our dev advocates. And this is a CAP application having built more or less on the CAP server with just the plain UI5 component or application inside. And what we did together is to improve the performance of this this application, this UI5 application in CAP, by adding the build tooling and benefit from preload, self-contained build, explain a little bit the pitfalls, and fix some issues.
And if people want to know more, they should watch the recording, because we do not have time that you talk about everything there.
I didn't talk about everything, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm a bit nervous on the time. So
put the link in the chat.
Exactly. You can find our recommendations on the Open UI5 YouTube channel. And we made a playlist of this, and I can post this link to the chat, paste link to the, yeah, you did already. So there you can see it. So that's from me. And now I think Stefan goes next with some news about the latest UI5 version, no?
Yes, so as you said, Margaret, we now release a new UI5 version, and it's again a specific one. It's 108, what is our next stable release. And on the cloud, it's already available, and it will come then on ABAP and the Fiori frontend server in February or end of January 2023. I would now like to talk about some updates. I now can scare all my co-presenters, especially Peter, because I could talk easily an hour about the slides that I had. I won't do that. I just give you an overview quickly, because we talked about a lot of the stuff that over the year, what is now in, and the difference compared to the previous release. And the previous stable release give you good indication why you should do it. And also you can take the opportunity, if you want us to talk about one of these topics, then in one of the next session, speak up, then we can go into the details. So as I said, what is somehow the key difference is compared to 1.96. Now you heard about that. We have basically introduced UI5 web components, and it's not only the cool web components that we have released for other UI frameworks. It's also key that since the last release, we have also enabled this web component consumption inside of SAP UI5 and OpenUI5. So all this cool new stuff is available now. As I said, we will now do all the new control development for SAP UI5 only as web components and offer them as the retrofitted controls. And that means all the UI5 customers, SAP UI5 customers, will profit automatically. And if you have some slightly different use cases where you use other programming models like rectangle view or anything else, you also have something that we can give you to add all the kind of enterprise qualities that you know, not all, but a lot of them that you know from SAP UI5. Here is somehow the picture where we usually talk about these various offerings, the pros and cons. You in the center of the slide see that we have this kind of reusable layer of the web components. We have the big block and consumer SAP UI5 with your elements on top, but also we have a React-based solution in the SAP offering, and also the Angular library NGX that you can use if you have some use cases and want some framework support coming from SAP. On the other hand, also web components, obviously, as I showed in the previous picture, can be even consumed on an HTML web page. So that means in any environment that you would like to have. But this is a longer story to explain all aspects of the slides. If you wonder, we did it already. So if I should repeat, please let us know. Also, we have really invested a lot into a modern and cohesive development experience for SAP UI5. We have now easy UI5 generators. We are now open with the template contributions and saw already nice contributions from the community. We have invested into the UI5 tooling. It's a nice command line interface. And in the meantime, we also have everything exposed via the Business Application Studio. We have UI5 for the testing. And there's now a really cool community platform for all these assets, being bestofui5.org. Also a key improvement is now the TypeScript support. Please make use of TypeScript. It's a really cool feature, and also important if you run into trouble, if APIs are not as good as they could be, don't go over it and work around it. Drop us a GitHub issue, open a BCP ticket. So we have to get aware if there are some API descriptions not ideal. And with that, the TypeScript support is not ideal. We are still working on that, but in principle, you help us really in opening tickets. If you run into something, don't work around if you have to know how to do so. You can obviously do the workaround to proceed, but please take your time to drop us a ticket and help that other ones not knowing the workaround get our help and the original support. We really intend to improve our quality here. Also very important, so in the meantime, the OData v4 stack is now, with your elements, we declared it a default inside of SAP. So the default is if you build a new application, use OData v4. There are some exceptional cases where it does not yet work out, then still can go for v2. But in the end, v4 made really good progress over the year. And also what is really cool new feature is the flexible programming model that somehow gets rid of the boundary between freestyle UI5 and Fiori elements. You can come from both sides, use all the aspects as depicted in the slide, and have a seamless continuum from doing freestyle up to Fiori elements and the building blocks, whatever you prefer and how you prefer it. Also really cool and important improvement. We have done a lot of investment into the SAP UI5 flexibility. That means the option for different personas to adjust applications that were delivered by SAP or by a partner. We have done this for developer, key users, and end users. In the key user space, there are really cool improvements that also visualize the changes, give you a kind of nice handling. What was done over time, and you can now also go back in time, build on a certain change set and fork from there on. So you manage, let's say, to manage your changes is now much easier. Also, the variant handling was introduced, quite some improvements, and also important is now the future of the developer adaptation is adaptation projects in the Business Application Studio. If you have extension projects in the SAP Web ID, I ideally migrate them wherever possible, but also we listen to you and the community. And also know that for certain applications, adaptation projects are not working. And also we plan in the first quarter next year to then come for that scenario also with an extension pane in the Business Application Studio, where you can take over these projects also in a modern environment. And there are some select other statements that we have introduced IANA time zones for date and time data. We can also now configure time zone via annotations. That means if you want an input field to display a value in a very specific time zone, independent from where the user is, you can now do this via annotations. Also appreciated by a lot of customers. We have done a lot of improvements in the tables, especially in the table width handling, which now much better and gives a more optimal experience. We now have PDF export, and we have export to Google Sheets if you run an ABAP cloud environment. Also integration cards, adaptive cards, and many, many more features. But as I said, this would exceed the time that I have to speak. So as a last topic, we still work on our Google Lighthouse score and the startup performance. You basically see now here a screenshot from specific applications where we want to be with a really cool 95 score. And as said, 108 is not yet there, but it is close, and we get closer with every release. So here we are really working hard into that direction. And to find out more what is upcoming, go into our Roadmap Explorer, type in and search for SAP UI5, and then you get all the information at hand. So this is my short overview today. And as said, drop it into the chat if you need more details in one of the next sessions here.
Perfect. Thank you. So, Jorge, your turn.
Hey everyone. So I would say that talking about TypeScript and UI5, it's not something really new. So Peter, Andreas, and Stefan have already spoke about it quite a lot in the last 2 years, at least. So despite of that, one of the issues that I faced when trying to do so was that in some regard, the development experience was still not great. So I tried to bring something to improve that as well. So I'll show you a little bit of what I did to help with that. So so we managed to include, with the help of Peter, the transpiling of TypeScript to JavaScript inside the UI5 tooling, which was really nice. So I'll show you a quick template. So using the UI5, so this tooling is already used in the latest template. So I'll quickly install the application and show you what we've been up to here.
So now we need to do the belly button dance to bridge the waiting time.
I use the time to zoom maybe a bit because it's not so well readable maybe on the big screen.
That depends on your eye quality now.
Is it better?
Less screen size.
On the window size, for example, I should use the entire window.
But at the end, now after that step, you will have a ready-to-use application where you can directly typically type npm start.
Yeah. Should have installed it before.
Yeah, I very often create a project already upfront, so and just do the same steps again, that it looks like being freshly created, but it has already the node modules pre-installed. But no problem. That should be not taking too long. But for demos, for live demos, this is a bit more the efficient way then. Good, but we bridged the time, luckily.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get on with it. So actually, we should have a working application right now, as Peter said. So just to be sure, let's try to run it. It's there. Oops.
And it comes already with the Horizon theme. So we also updated the template to use Horizon.
Yeah. So now looking at the application code itself, as you can see, if I can.
Can you press Ctrl+ twice or so?
Yeah, better.
Thank you. Yeah, much better.
So you can see in the web app, pretty much what we have is just TypeScript codes everywhere. So it can be easily used right now. And what I want to really focus is here on the package JSON, where we can see that the only thing that we really need to really run the application now is to just have the UI5 serve to start it up, and everything else is UI5 CLI magic. Yeah. So looking at the tooling itself, you see we have this on the server side. We have now this middleware that was not available before, where you can just say wherever our TS code is.
No, you need to go one down, the UI5 Tooling-Transpile middleware.
Oh, sorry. This one. Yeah, you're right. This is the one. So it assumes that you are using the web app as a source for your code, and that's pretty much it. You also have a few flags that you can use, but they were all available in the previous version of the tooling just for the JavaScript transpiling. And now the new functionality is really being able to use it for TypeScript as well. So I can also.
By the way, can you also have the previous, how it looked previously, compare side by side? Because I think then you would really see the beneficial thing.
Exactly. So I'll compare here the current, actually start with the package JSON, compare it with the old version that I have here as well. Can you see it easily? Okay. So as you see here, you have a bunch of scripts here. If you compare the start script that we had before, so we had to run actually two processes to be able to develop with it. So one to launch the application, which is the start UI5, which is the same as we have today. But then we needed this watch TS, which was pretty much this bubble script that would do the transpiling for us. And this is pretty much what the tooling is taking care of nowadays. As well, there are a bunch of dependencies here that were needed for the development, all these Babel related dependencies that are now included inside the tooling, this UI5 Tooling-Transpile. So they are not needed anymore for the development environment. So instead of having now these two processes in parallel running for the development, we have the UI5 tooling taking care of everything. So making it more straightforward to use like this. And same for the build. So there are a few scripts needed to get it up and running. Another thing that was not as nice before was that we had this source folder where we had our TypeScript code, but then the transpile task would create the JavaScript transpiled folders into this web app which was already a generated folder. And then if you wanted to build the application, we had the third folder for the distribution. So a lot of steps to get to the end result, let's say it like this. And now with the current scenario, if you want to build the application, so the web app already has our TypeScript and the distribution folder as the final result in the end, which is pretty nice.
Basically, more or less the way of configuring Babel also, it's still the same. So in the Babel RC JSON, there is also available then in the new project. So if you want to add additional configurations there, you can also do so or extend it even. And I think this transpile plugin, also the previous version of this UI5 task transpile and the UI5 middleware live transpile, they both had already the feature to embed the Babel, this Babel configuration. And this is all still available. I think from that perspective, yeah, you can maybe also show a little bit. So this, I think the new option which has been added is mainly this transpile TypeScript as a flag here in.
Exactly. So this is pretty much configuration wise. This is the only thing new, which is this transpile TypeScript flag. Everything else was already available, and we just took advantage of it for the TypeScript transpiling as well. Also, before we had two different modules for the transpiling, this middleware and task, that they are now pretty much deprecated, and now we have this UI5 Tooling-Transpile, which can do both the middleware and the task work. Nevertheless, they are still both available in NPM, and what they really do is behind the scenes they are calling the new one, so they are always up to date with the new module that we have right now.
Yeah, that was also an essential thing to keep the existing projects running using already the old middleware and the old task. And with that, we could now evolve the tooling further and have now this TypeScript transpilation also as part of that.
And since the configuration that you can use, it's mostly the same, it shouldn't break any project that used it before. So, and that's I would say pretty much what I had to show you here. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll give the word to the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Jorge. Also, that that investment, what you did, was also, let's say, the precondition that the Fiori tools could go ahead. They also enabled for TypeScript now, the newer project, and for them it was really an essential piece to have it own in the web app folder. So you enabled also with your contribution and others, and that was really a great investment, and thank you for that.
I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, also thank you from my side, and I think also from our participants, they really like what you show, so great. And yeah, as Volker said, like, I mean, you both said we should deprecate then the old NPMs, should or we will?
Deprecation or maybe this archiving is one thing which we can't do. I wrote it also in the chat. It's a monorepo, so there are the other packages are inside, but we could, as we have versioning, we could definitely also remove it. So we don't really have them part anymore of the repository, and we don't release newer version. The old versions would be available. So that would be also an option to do so.
I guess it's easier for like the consumer.
In PM.js, yeah, we could use an archive option as well. Let's see. That's something to, I didn't use that so far.
Besides of this, I see no comments or questions. So I guess it's time for Andreas then, who has also something to present.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm sharing my screen. So we have been talking about TypeScript a lot now recently, in many presentations, UI5Con, UI5ers Live, whatever. And in many of these presentations, I have mentioned that the type definitions even make sense for JavaScript development, because you then also get a sort of code completion and everything. But actually, we never showed how this is done. There's a sample on GitHub, but I want to put your attention on this sample now today and show just some steps right in the IDE, in this code. So what I'm using here today is the traditional UI5 Cup event app sample app that is written in pure JavaScript. Actually, yeah, in the main branch, it's in pure JavaScript. which has, if you don't know, it's, for example, this form UI, which is just for entering some data. And this part I'll use here now in VS Code. This is the registration controller that is controlling this view with the data entry written in pure JavaScript. And now we are gonna add sort of TypeScript support for this. So not for programming in TypeScript, but for getting code completion type checks and so on from TypeScript in this JavaScript implemented application. And to do so, you first need to add dependencies to TypeScript itself and to the UI5 types. So here we use the sub UI5 types because there's, I think, some export functionality somewhere, which is not in OpenUI5. So the project basically knows TypeScript and the UI5 types. And the second thing we need to do then, once this is done, which is pretty fast, right, Peter, is to add on the same level inside this form application here, the tsconfig JSON file. So this is basically telling TypeScript what the project is about, where the resources are, and so on. So most importantly here now the type roots is the UI5 types that we have just imported, and because they are in a non-default namespace, we also have to add the default namespace again. Very important is, of course, allow JS, because we are now really only developing in JS and check JS, so we want to have type checks in JavaScript. And some other settings I don't dive into right now. And you see already here in the registration controller, we get some errors, which is basically a good thing when we want to have type checks. The first thing you have to do, however, is to give types to these dependencies we load, because usually when we write really in TypeScript, we use the modern ES modules, and TypeScript automatically knows what the types for those are. But TypeScript doesn't know the sub UI define function, or it does know it, but it doesn't know what happens exactly from these strings to these objects. So they are all typed any. And the first thing to do then, to get these variables, these imported dependencies typed, basically, is to use JSDoc, where you can use the params to basically assign a type. And now this looks a bit ugly, and this is caused by us using the new ES modules, the ESM flavor of the types, so to say. If you use the deprecated globals, then you could also write something like sub.ui.core and so on. And that's it. This looks, of course, much nicer, but still you are using then the types for the globals, which we don't really want to use, because then you can write sub-UI something everywhere without importing it. So this is why I think we have to accept that we say type of, then import a module. This is, so to say, from the type. So we can now really click through to the UI5 type definitions and the default export from those modules. Looks a bit ugly, but this is our apple we have to bite into, as we say in German. But then you actually have these things typed. So here the controller, message box, and so on. If you want to do message box show, then you get immediately the full TypeScript code completion stuff, message box dot alert, whatever. You get the inline documentation. So that's all provided now by the TypeScript types and by the TypeScript compiler that is running here in VS Code automatically, since we added the tsconfig. And at least if you scroll down a bit to some place I have looked up earlier, then you see that here the by ID, controller by ID is working. The get binding returns the binding. And on the binding, well, on a binding base class, this is now the same problem you run into as when you are really using TypeScript. Binding class is returned, but the create is only available on the OData before list binding. So of course, when you want to have type checks and type safety in JavaScript, you also have to do some things like you have in TypeScript, for example, a typecast here. But at least many things work out of the box and are like giving benefits out of the box when you just typed the imports. So if you want to do the typecast here, you just use the same way of specifying the type. Again, yeah, it looks ugly, but that's well, JavaScript with TypeScript support. And I have to put this into braces to make it work. There's something I copied. Okay, now with the typecast, it's really no data list binding, and the create also is now working because it's only OData list binding. Still, I mean, apart from the strange syntax to specify the types, there are some drawbacks. For example, something I noticed when I say this .o model or whatever here, even if I mistype, then in some cases the actually here the this suddenly doesn't work anymore. The this by ID is not known anymore. And when I just remove the line I just added, and this is something else, and it knows somehow magically that there is a controller and the controller has by ID. So there are basically some quirks. This entire thing is still something you have to experiment with, right? So this is not full-featured type support out of the box, runs everything very well. But this is something to explore, let's say, and to check how far you get with JavaScript and TypeScript support. Yeah, this is also why, for example, in the very first method, you get here an error because somehow because this dot something is used here. This doesn't work anymore as it did in the other method. It's just on method level. I haven't exported this. I noticed this difference just today. So this is, as I said, something to experiment with. Everything else about this, and really a walkthrough starting from a JavaScript application and then going from there. So it's also using this UI5 Cup event up here in the branch JS with TypeScript. When I switch to this branch, then you get whatever I did now in the session, plus a lot more. How you get from really many errors that are still displayed in my VS Code to a state where there's a lot of type checking, everything is type checked, lots of code completion, but of course with additional efforts. Some typecasts here, you can define your own structures there, your custom data structures you are handling in the application. So you can do many things in JS doc without going really to the TypeScript syntax overall. But of course, in the end, when you do many of those things, then the question is, why don't you completely switch to TypeScript, right? Maybe because you don't want to add the generation step, but of course, the effort when you want to have everything typed and type checked, the effort for specifying the types for everything is of course the same. So it's not magically now going in JavaScript without doing this. But it's definitely something interesting one could look into to get maybe to a certain level of code completion and type checking, maybe not going all the way, because then TypeScript itself would be the better and less verbose, I would say, option. In this documentation, there's also a trick applied, so to say, because do I have 1-2 minutes left? Yeah. Because basically TypeScript also doesn't know controller.extend. It doesn't know that we have now defined a new class, registration, inheriting from controller, which has all these methods like overwritten on init and additional methods like delete family member. So this is something that TypeScript doesn't know because this is something completely UI5 specific here. And therefore in this sample, we have also gone the way, I hope I find it quickly, that we really switch the class implementation from this UI5 specific syntax to real JavaScript classes and inheritance with the 6 classes. And then many of these things I just showed with this, which is not working, they suddenly work as expected because now TypeScript knows that's a class, inherits from this type, which it knows, and so on. So that can also help, but this does not work when you have classes that have metadata, because metadata block, so like in a component, if you have metadata there, this cannot be applied now in such a class, at least not yet. We are thinking about ways how to do that. Also controllers with metadata block don't work this way, but controllers like this one, you can just change to the class syntax And then many of these errors go away and everything works much better. And last but not least, we have in the easy UI5 generator, I can't show it now anymore completely, but we have changed the template for the regular app, for the JavaScript app, to also include I have it here, the result, to also include the TS config, more or less like I showed it here with the type roots, and also include the dependencies to the UI5 types. And
no, TypeScript is not included because I think by default you don't need that.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's mainly only necessary if you want to do linting.
Yeah, we don't want to compile here. But basically you get the starting point here with the TypeScript setup already, and then you can start like adding the type definitions for the import here, as I just showed.
I think mainly useful it's for the UI5 stuff. If you want to get code completion for the UI5 modules, then you can use this the syntax here for the parameters, and you can benefit from code completion inside that then. But as Andreas showed, it's quite limited, and it depends also on how much effort you want to put into adding additional JS doc information.
Right. That's it. Peter, you wanted 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes.
I wanted 5 minutes, and so you should see a Visual Studio Code. And you see also here an extension, the UI5 Language Assistant. So we have some weeks back released the v3.3.0 version of the UI5 Language Assistant, and this now includes a long-awaited feature. It's the multi-version support for the XML view code completion. And if you update your VS Code, then you get that functionality in, or you install that. So if you open then XML view in a UI5 project, then you will see that there is a new item present in the status bar. I increase it a little bit because I think the focus is here, and this shows then the version of UI5 being used. And there is a little hint whether it's using Open UI5 or not. It's that tick at the end of the version number just for you. And if you click on that or hover on that, you see also Open UI5. And if you click on that, it points you directly to the documentation for that concrete version. So you can directly open the documentation from here. And also inside the XML view, you now get then the code completion also for this specific version. So for example, here, in the past, there were maybe also one or the other controls missing. And maybe if we go back, I didn't test it properly up front. So maybe it's a bit shaky, but shaky in a way that I don't know whether it shows less than if I change the version. So if we now switch back to 171, or so, we should see less entries. And the version is derived from the manifest of the project, from the min UI5 version you specify there. So if we specify, for example, 171, and let's use the 0 here, it will also now check whether the version is available. If the version is not available on the CDN anymore when resolving that, it will resolve against the latest version, the latest patch of that version. And so there is some version negotiation also happening behind the scenes. And the framework, for example, so as we have here now Open UI5, but I want to show it to you with SAP UI5. This is derived from the UI5 YAML. So here in the UI5 YAML, you have the framework name. And if you switch here now to SAP UI5, then if you open now the view again, we will see that the version is now displayed without a tick. So I can also go and jump there. So now it's going to the UI5sap.com and not to SDK Open UI5.org, which is the Open UI5 variant. So it will also show you the links then directly in the concrete demo kits for that. And if I'm not wrong, then it shows at least a different list. So there's an add bookmark button, which isn't available in the newer version anymore. And you can then use that, select that, you get the code completion for that as you are used to that. But now you get that really for different versions. And that's more or less what I wanted to show. It's also available in Business Application Studio. It's pre-installed there. And there you can then also make use of the code completion depending on the version you have in your project. Yeah, that's it. Maybe one last thing to mention. So the default framework being used is SAP UI5. So if no configuration has been found, then this is being used. And if no version can be found, it uses the old, I think it's 171.49 version, which was the default also in the previous version for that. So that this at least continues to work, even if no configuration is being found. I think if I removed it here, even if it's not good, then it also, there's the zoom. Yeah, so it's going to 171.49 in this case. Yeah, and that's more or less what I wanted to show to you. You can play around with that and feel free to also give feedback.
There's a question from Tobias, 103. I'm just checking here. 103 is not on CDN anymore at all, I think. Yeah,
could be. So we can check that.
Yeah, falling back to 71 is maybe then a bit too much.
No, it's not going back to 171 in this case. It's really, no, it should not be the case. So let's open that. I have 103. So this is still available. So for me, it works. Then there is maybe another issue. So it requires internet access because the code completion is fetched from the demo kit. So it downloads the API JSON for the different libraries and stores them locally in a cache.
Okay, 103 is still there. Sorry.
Just wanted to say, if you also check on the version overview and search for 103, you can see that both patches are still there and only are removed next year in end of Q3.
Let's use a 176 version. So this is most probably not there. What you see now is that this code completion is also negotiation the version and uses the next available LTS version, and there the latest patch. So it resolves the version against that. And also if you enter, for example, something like 171 here as a min version, which is also allowed, it resolves then to the highest patch version for that 171 version. And the same happens also to 196, for example. So it resolves then automatically to the latest patch. So that's something which happens then automatically by that plugin behind the scenes, that the version is then properly resolved against the next fitting version from the version availability metrics.
Maybe you can show here, like really, if you're looking for removed patches, search here in that list. And if you can find an entry, then it's still on CDN available.
I think it's no longer officially maintained. This is why it's missing in the top list, but down here in this list, it's still existing 1 year longer or so.
But that's why people get confused sometimes, because they only look at the first table. But for the removal, actually, this lower table is the more important one.
So first table says it's supported. Lower table, it's still existing, right?
Exactly, like there you can really see which, because at the end it's always like a patch level, no, that get removed.
Is the end of cloud provisioning not also displayed in all the tables?
No, but up it's only like for the general version, no? But at the end you have to check if the patch is already removed or not. And this specific information you only get in the second list. And there you can always search for your patch and see if it's still available or not. That's, I think people really need to understand that that's the more reliable table when looking for when a patch will be removed.
Or use the evergreen code line.
Yeah. For SAP UI5 at least, and when you are using long-term maintenance as for the other ones, it's not available, no? Just to be complete here. So 3 minutes after, so it was good that I interrupted you at the beginning, Peter. I'm sorry.
I'm used to that because Stefan took so much time.
No, you took over time this time.
Yeah, before you start now, yeah, at the end, and I just wanted to say, December we plan to be on air again. So please join us again then in December, hopefully with quite interesting topics again like this time, and also with some topics from the community. Thanks again, Jorge. It was so great to have you here. It was a great project, and really, yeah, also the community really enjoyed it, watching that. So great work. Stay with us, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. And thank you for having me. It was really good to show what I've been doing here. Yeah.
You have a white card. No, you can always come here. So always welcome.
Ideas are welcome.
Exactly. And that means also here, if someone wants to join us here, just give us a note and we are more than happy to invite you to talk to you and to see what you did. So saying this, it's time to go home or whatever you are doing. So hope to see you in December and have a good evening, day, afternoon, night, whatever. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.